So tell me about your business.
Yeah, so it's a perfect segue because I haven't been playing enough music, so I've been focusing on it. But yeah, basically, my profession's always been in social media, content creation, all that stuff, and so I decided to start my own company a little less than 2 years ago. And I left. I was at Facebook at the time, and I left Facebook to start this company. And the goal of this company really is, in my time working for a lot of these different companies, what I've found is that the there are a lot of full-time positions for social media people, and an optimal social media strategy hardly ever necessitates a full-time person from what I've seen. There's a diminishing return from when you start posting a lot of content to when you start to not see as much benefit out of that. So for brands, I wanted to create a company that would be very competitive and cheaper than hiring an inside hire, especially for companies who want that person but can't afford them yet, while providing better value and better results. So what we do is we bring on clients, either do this in house, or we bring on a video partner to make like some very high quality content, and we do it very much, soup to nuts. Do it for them. Create all this content in their brand image, utilizing them, usually the owner of the company, and we're able to do 10,000 followers guaranteed and up to 50,000 views per month guaranteed, or their money back.
Taking some notes. So guaranteed 10,000 users, or what was the other metric?
Yeah, guaranteed 10,000 followers a month, and guaranteed 50,000 views per month on their content.
If I remember correctly, you're charging 4,000 a month.
Yeah, it actually ranges. We have different packages, so between 2,000 and 4,000 a month.
We'll come back to the what. How's it going?
It's great. We really love it. We have fantastic LTV. Like when we bring folks on and they sign up, they hardly ever leave. What we've definitely struggled with is finding those folks in that perfect niche. We definitely get a lot of people who say, "Oh, yeah, I want ads to do click through traffic and lead generation," all of which we can do, but we like to try and just focus on brand building and brand awareness. So that's the hardest part because it's a very niche audience to target to. But once we get those, we find those folks, they stay for a year plus on average.
Started to say struggling to find. You're struggling to find people who are interested in brand building and brand awareness as opposed to lead generation?
Yes.
How are you doing it now? How
Sorry,
are you looking for people and finding them now?
Yeah, we do a lot of cold outreach via email. That's kind of our primary one, but we're also reaching out a lot on LinkedIn as well. And that helps us to target businesses that are kind of at least in the financial range that would benefit the most from our services.
You say, wait, how many people in the company?
It's just me and a contractor right now.
And what's the contractor do?
Cindy.
What does she do? What part of it?
Oh, sorry. She's doing the video editing.
Okay, so she's not doing the marketing. All the marketing is you?
Correct.
Okay. And so when you're doing your cold outreach and email on LinkedIn, so you're doing connection requests primarily?
Yes,
Or
doing connection requests on LinkedIn, yeah.
any in-mail or anything like that?
We've done a little bit of that in the past, but I find it much better to have a more long-tailed approach by connecting with them, learning a bit more about it before jumping directly into a pitch.
So tell me about the acceptance rate and conversion rates.
Yes. So acceptance rates of, let's say, like a first meeting.
Connection requests.
Without the data right in front of me, it's probably roughly 10%, give or take a couple percentage points for a meeting. acceptance or a conversion rates would be probably 20% of that.
Convert to a meeting.
After a meeting, conversion rate on the meeting.
So let me go back.
Yeah.
10 agree to take your connection, correct?
Exactly.
What fraction of them take a meeting?
1/5.
So 20% of the people who accept your connection request convert to a meeting. And then what's the next step after a meeting?
That would be to whether, depending on who we're reaching out to, it could be work together for a partnership, which I can talk about in a second, or that would be, just to actually sign up for the first month and trying us out.
Using some bandwidth here. Okay, so trial and what you said, that's about 20%. So it's 10% of who you reach out to, 20% convert to a meeting, and 20% of those. So basically 5% overall that
Right.
you get something out of. Is that paid?
No, that's organic. You mean how we reach out to them?
No, in other words, at what point do they pay? Do they pay for the trial?
That would be yes.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good, right? So you reach out to 100 people, you're getting 5 clients out of it. Is that about right?
About right. The problem is finding the right 100 people.
Okay, how are you doing that?
So that's where, what we do currently is a lot of this is focused on the email side of things. The email side of things is very tough to. We have a great tool that helps us pinpoint people to reach out to with a cold email strategy. However, its limitations are finding people, especially with the right, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, personality. A lot of different folks could benefit from the branding focus. However, they may feel otherwise. And so we have to be very exclusive about who we target to keep good rates like that.
So how many people typically do you reach out to with a connection request per week?
So this is where it's tricky. So because that's just talking about specifically LinkedIn, right?
Right.
Yeah. So LinkedIn is a much smaller number, maybe about 100 people per month.
100 people per month. That makes more sense. Okay. So basically you're closing 4 or 5 trials a month.
Yeah.
Out of LinkedIn. Okay. Let me go back. Let me just move something around. The more I understand about this, the better. Okay. So in terms of email, how many emails are you sending out a month?
About 10,000.
Okay. And metrics against that?
That would be roughly a 60% open rate and a 5% reply rate.
And you're sending that off of your own domain?
No, we have a lot of domains set up specifically for that
All right. So
process.
you're avoiding the spam problem.
Yeah.
Do you have an example email that you're sending out?
Sure. Let's see. Okay. Example, one of the ones that we sent out recently. This would be reaching out to a company that we know is of the right size to benefit of this service. This would be, hi, first name, congrats on the success at company name. I imagine it's hard to dedicate time to growing your brand on social media when you have so much else on your plate. I've worked at Facebook and TikTok and now help companies get 10,000 followers every month, or they don't pay. Would you have time this week for a quick chat to see if we can do the same for your company name? Best, Cole.
Okay. In terms of what are you using as a source for your list?
Apollo.io.
Okay. Okay. And you're offering a guarantee. You're telling them about your credentials. What were you doing were you doing social media at Facebook and TikTok?
Facebook and TikTok was content moderation. So enforcing some of those moderation rules to either promote or demote content.
Okay. How do you feel about the whole issue of TikTok and getting banned?
Yeah, TikTok's interesting. I mean, I think that it's a fair point. It's really tough to trust the Chinese government or any of their companies who are beholden to them. So that makes sense. Honestly, it's a whole separate conversation, but there are bigger issues to the American people that happen on TikTok that aren't even addressed, especially with younger age groups. But that's something you'd see from a moderator's perspective, though.
Right. So this is a really dumb question. If you're offering a guarantee like that, what's your success rate?
For who hits that guarantee?
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
We usually hit over that. That's why we make sure our guarantee is something that we can always hit.
And so when you're successful in getting them the traffic, the views, and the visibility, followers, how long do you typically keep a client?
On average, I would say 8 months, which is probably conservative. Most of our clients have been with us for more than a year. But we do have, a couple ones who there's a misalignment with expectations.
In terms of what's the misalignment? They think that getting followers is good, and the money will roll in, and then it doesn't.
That's usually what it is. Yeah, it's usually seeing the value, but thinking that the value will solve all of their small business problems.
Is that something that you have the ability to address or have thought about addressing?
Yeah, we try to take care of that with the expectations all up front. We really don't want anyone to feel like they're not getting the value that they thought they would. I'm a big proponent of hitting all of the expectations of your client. So that makes the sales process harder because we're working against ourselves a bit. But essentially, we want to talk about how a lot of the small businesses that we reach out to, they love that idea. The problem is they can afford it, but they can afford that, and they put all of their hopes and dreams into just that, when in reality they probably need to also get better on their lead generation, on their follow-up, on their sales process. And so they sometimes, again, we've had some folks who get great results. We hit exactly every metric we promised, but they say, I don't see how this helps my business. In which case, when that stuff, we try to educate them on that branding is a long-term play. It's not a short-term fix.
How do they react? Do they get disappointed when they finally realize it, or they say, yeah, you're right, you told me all along, and so I think we've done enough branding, now I need to move on and do something else?
Usually the latter. We hardly ever have anyone who's upset at us because, again, we're fulfilling every promise we make. But it's usually, yeah, they've come to the realization, say, oh, this felt like it was perfect for me. You didn't do anything, or didn't promise anything that you didn't accomplish, but I'm realizing that I need X, Y, and Z else instead.
So if I go back to what you originally framed, so it doesn't sound like account retention is the big problem. You'd like it to be better, but you've done what you promised to do. And, if if they're capable of doing the lead generation or whatever else they need besides just the branding and visibility and followers and all that kind of stuff, then you would keep accounts forever, but it's not a critical path item for you. The critical path item for you is filling the top of the funnel, and it sounds even more within that component is targeting, right? Okay. So to what degree, the dumb question, if you're getting on a 10,000 a 5% reply rate, why not just scale that end of it? Why not just crank up the numbers?
So yes, well, I think the problem is that that's a 5% reply rate. However, what we found is that, our highest retention clients usually come from clients that we already have that have referred. We get a really good referral benefit. So a lot of the new clients that we come in who are perfect are ones from current clients that are perfect who have referred folks that are like them in multiple ways. So we have a good aspect going with the cold email outreach, and we are tweaking that consistently to try and scale that up and increase a lot of those numbers. But right now, I think it's definitely slower than we would like. It is growing, but it's slower than we would like, just because we know targeting is that bigger side, and probably also, of course, the sales side that includes the targeting and the conversation piece. So it's always something we're looking to kind of improve faster, and even though we are growing, that's something we want to tweak and make better.
You lost me. So if you look at your cold email outreach, right? It's okay, but you imply that it's not it's not satisfactory, right? It's not good enough, but you can't just scale it to make it better, right? In other words, if you're doing 10,000 and you're getting 5% reply rate, you're able to close a bunch of those, right? If you went to and let's say that pays the rent, right? And you say, all right, fine, let me do 20,000 the next month, or 30 or 50,000, right? The numbers should scale, right? Therefore, if you're closing 5% on 10,000, whatever the close rate is, right? If you're closing 50 at 500, right? Is that right? 10,000 would be 500, right? The reply rate is 500. So maybe you close half of those or 20% of those. So if you close 100 a month, that's a lot of money, right? So something isn't
Yeah,
jiving. What am I missing?
yeah. So and maybe the numbers have gotten mixed up too. So the 10,000 that we reach out to, 5% of those folks reply. So a reply is not always a positive meeting.
Okay.
And then once we have the meeting, obviously there's a percentage of those folks, because I think the original funnel we spoke about was LinkedIn, and that's kind of a different apparatus that we're experimenting with.
All right. So within the 5% that reply, what percent of those do you get a meeting with? 20% the other?
Probably 10% of those.
That makes more sense. And then of those, what percent close?
Something like 5%. That's the close rate.
Okay. So that makes more sense. All right. So that now we're getting down to some small numbers, because at 500, then you're down to 50, and then you're down to two and a half. Okay. Two closes a month. Okay.
Yes.
So scaling, and I got to believe that scaling the number of emails would be painful to some degree.
It is, and there are also limitations in how those lists that we get from the emails. Those lists that are the best performing ones are when we reach out to companies who are looking to hire a social media person. That's a great list of leads. That's where we get the most of our opportunities from. But that we're only able to get like a couple hundred emails per week, maybe. So that one's tougher. And then we reach out to businesses who aren't necessarily hiring, but are within the demographics that we want to target, that we could give the most success to. And that group we have a lot of emails there, but those rates are not as effective. They're not as warm leads, basically.
Are you sitting on the job boards looking for companies that are hiring social media people?
Yep, we've done that. Done a lot of LinkedIn jobs, and Indeed, it has been a big one for us. So I'll actually apply to it. Benefit of being a smaller company and just a single member LLC. I'll apply to those positions, specifically contractor ones, and then in the conversations with them, try and help them understand why working with us as a company actually makes more sense than a freelance hire.
And what are the biggest objections that you get when you engage on that level?
Usually metrics that, in my opinion, actually don't matter as much. We want remote hire, but they're remote in our city. That's a big one. So that they can, in my opinion, they could probably flip that switch if they wanted to, and make them in-house. But that's a big one. Not wanting to work with a quote agency is another big one. And honestly, one of the biggest ones, especially when we get to companies of a slightly bigger size, is just not talking to the decision maker. And all the hiring is being done by a W-2 employee. They can't really make that call.
Tell me a little bit about any sales training that you've had or any particular sales techniques that you use.
Yeah, something I'm definitely trying to grow my skill set in. I've had no formal sales training, never done a sales job in the past per se, and so a lot of what I've been trying to learn is based off of just a couple of books, a couple of folks who talk a lot about that content on YouTube, so to speak, and a couple of different platforms. But that's really the extent of it. Some of the tactics that I've tried out, and I'm definitely that's my blind spot in the skills process, is like a question based framework, trying to help folks kind of go through and answer these questions and understand the need for the issue to be solved themselves, rather than me trying to say, here's what we can do, here's how it helps you. Ask them questions that would lead them down the way to believe that this would be a solution for their problems.
That's the way to do it. Okay. Have you read any books on it or any people you follow?
Yeah, there's I read some social media specific books, but which is relatable, but not on the sales side as much. The sales books, there's a couple different ones from an author, Alex Hormozy, that I think are fantastic. It's $100 million sales, and the second one is $100 million offers.
So if you had to say which problem was the bigger one, is it the fill in the top of the funnel or your close rate?
Probably close rate.
Okay. It's the right answer, by the way.
Okay.
So I mean, look, there are issues. Tony, you've at least got it what we refer to as a non-zero response rate, and there are a bunch of things I could talk to you about that could help increase the number of at-bats that you get. But if stuff is not closing because you're running into an in-house objection and not in our city objection, you're not talking to the decision maker objection. Those are things that are so easy to fix that you could double or triple your earnings just by fixing those things and not have to do a lick of work. And in fact, you would have to do less work than you're currently doing if you fix those things, right? So it's not even a matter of working smarter rather than harder. It's, and I'll cut to the chase. You're on the right track if you're going after question-based sales techniques, okay? And I'll tell you which ones you want to be focusing on in a moment. But if you can imagine a sales process whereby you ask questions and then shut up and let them answer the question and let them persuade themselves and close themselves. That's a lot less work than you trying to give them 15 reasons why they ought to buy from you, or 10 reasons why outsourcing is better than in-house. And, you know, that, I mean, that just, you're beating your head against the wall if you're in what we refer to as tell mode, right? So the shortest path to getting to where you want to go, and I should ask, where do you want to go? I mean, do you have a number of accounts that you want to close? Do you have a certain revenue goal that you're trying to hit right now, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we'd love to get to our next goal would be 20 consistent monthly clients. That'd be our next closest goal. We're at about 11 to 12 right now. And beyond that, I mean, for this company itself, I mean, we would love to hit $1 million in top line revenue. In a year. That'd be great. That'd be fantastic.
So it sounds like you could get to the 20 with what you have coming in the top of your funnel right now, if you can
Yes.
fix the close rate. Okay. So there's a couple of, and I have to admit, I'm not that up on who the latest and greatest sales trainers are today, okay? Because the classic ones that are out there form the basis of all the good ones that are there today. And so if you go to the classic ones, spin selling, solution selling, and consultative selling, those are there's one other book I'll recommend, but spin selling is by a guy named Neil Rackham. Solution selling and consultative selling, I forget who the authors are. One's Michael Boylan and or Brian something, I forget. I got them in my library back there. And then the final one is strategic selling by Miller and Hyman. There's almost nothing that's out there today that isn't based on those techniques. Okay. And the best one of all is spin selling by Rackham. And that technique enables you to qualify prospects, uncover needs, create urgency, build value, accelerate the process, and increase your close rate through a series of, and again, the three, consultative, spin, and solution selling, have slightly different takes on how to ask questions, how to formulate them, but they boil down to the same basic thing. Okay. And every nickel I ever made, I made off of learning those techniques. All that hardware back there, with one exception. That one is from PSS when I was at IBM. The other ones were all after I learned, and I love my sales hardware. That's, I always felt that if I needed a new car, just all I got to do is pick up the phone and make a call, right? But that's going to be the secret to your success, right? You can, Dale Carnegie's not bad, by the way, it's still around. But if you're in a mode to learn a technique, those are the techniques that will work. The books are good. The training is better. We do sales training also. And I'm not making a pitch for our sales training because I'm too tired to do it. I wrote a book. This is my book. And I've adapted those techniques for the telemarketing cold calling environment. So we have cold callers and they're required to know how to ask questions, to probe for needs, uncover problems, learn who's impacted by a problem. So for example, if you have an objection like, hey, really like what you have to say, but I want to be able to chase somebody around the room. I want to have one throat to choke. I want to be able to beat the guy up if he fails, right? So
Mm,
you can flesh out what's really behind that, and that's the insecurity or the
mm,
control, or more often, and I think what you'll run into if they're being honest with you, is that they want them to do other things besides the social media and have the ability to adapt to additional um, applications of marketing skill sets. So if they reveal that to you because you've asked the question rather than assumed what the answer is, then you can be more prepared to respond to it. And they may just say, hey, listen, what I'm more concerned about is, if that doesn't work, I want to be able to move off of that and say, okay, fine. Well, then what if we put in place an early warning trigger that says this isn't working for you? And, we look at the overall metrics. The other thing to think about is the, um, the problem you run into in your business is the KPIs versus what they're really after, right?
mm,
So you can deliver on a number of exposures, clicks, hits, visits, followers, and whatever. But if you can't be responsible for converting those and closing those, then you always run into a how do you pay for it, right? And so, what's the bottom line is always the bottom line. Now, there are ways around that, and that's actually what my business is about. Again, not going to worry about that at the moment. But at least if you have that discussion and don't simply either ignore it as the elephant in the room, because that's the elephant in the room that there is, right? Or you put in place a uh, an element of your process that can fix that problem. So, for example, um, I would imagine that a number of followers that people get, your clients don't do anything with, right? They just say, great, I got a bunch of followers, right? They don't call them, they don't reach out to them, they don't ping them, they don't nurture them, they don't close them. And so, therefore, they sit there and you've got nothing. Well, it's pretty easy to at least say, well, realize that we've done a great job of branding. We've gotten you a whole bunch of followers. If you have that, what are you going to do to turn that into revenue? Right?
mm.
Good question for you to ask, right? Rather than shy away from it, which is what a lot of guys. And I should ask if you're doing that, right? But because I'm making an assumption, which is exactly what I shouldn't be doing, right? Um, but if you say, well, what if you get all these followers? How are you going to convert them into revenue? If the guy says that's my problem, not yours, all of a sudden he's got no reason to cancel after 7 months,
Mhm.
because he's taken that on as his problem. On the other hand, if the guy says, that's a good question, I don't know what I do about it. Now you at least have an awareness of it. He's not going to blame you if the thing doesn't ring the cash register.
Right.
And you can collectively potentially find a way to fill that gap, whether it's to have an inside salesperson put on board to chase those people down, follow them up, or somehow monetize them, right? So get them to subscribe, get them to something, get them behind a paywall, right? A bunch of other things that maybe your scope doesn't cover, but that if you take at least some responsibility for it, or at least bring it into the dialogue, now at least it has the chance of protecting you from losing the account,
Right.
and importantly, increasing your value, and showing him, hey, we can help you there. I may not be able to solve this part of the problem myself, but at least let's call it out. It is definitely it's not a hole below the waterline. It's an issue that everybody has it in digital marketing today, lack of accountability for revenue, right? But if you identify it, at least you can come up with a solution. So I don't know if that'll help, but the sales technique of asking questions can get you into that dialogue and get you to the point of having that part of the conversation. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely helpful. And I think one thing that we can do that's very much inside of the wheelhouse, because I think I've mentioned that there's other things that a lot of folks are interested in that we could offer, but I constantly go back to having a very specific offer, a very specific product, And for the people who need that, that's where we're their guy. We could create landing pages, we could do click through ads and all that stuff. It's just that, especially right now, I'm trying to be more singular in my focus. But anyway, kind of coming back to that. One thing that I've been thinking about, and I think I would know your answer, but I've gone back and forth with the concept of bringing on a commissioned salesperson. And at first, I've been very against the idea because I like the concept of if something needs to be done for the business, that's my burden to build that skill set, and then recruit somebody later on. And I just want to make sure I still got you. Are we cutting out? Okay, good. So, I thought about that, and definitely my skill set lends itself more to product than the sales side. I'm not opposed to becoming a better salesperson, but I wonder what would be a simpler path, if it makes sense, because we can definitely afford something like maybe like $1,000 to $2,000 a month base salary, and then commission we actually have a lot of flexibility with. So we could have a well enticed salesperson, and then there is of course the process of the hiring process, finding the right people, and all of that. But I've definitely floated that idea in my head, and I there's some legitimacy there, it feels like, but I'd love to know your take on it.
So the first thing that you probably should do is make sure that you have a sales process worked out that actually works. Okay. And so the problem that you have with salespeople today, particularly if you load it up on commission, right, is most people couldn't sell their way out of a paper bag. Most salespeople today are jumping from job to job, living on a base until they realize they're not going to make their numbers and they get out of Dodge. And so you do have a little bit of a burden developing and proving in a methodology that actually works. So my recommendation is, because what you don't want to do, right? You said it's not in your wheelhouse, it's not your skill set to be able to sell. Then how are you going to manage this person? Are you just going to trust that they know what they're doing? You will die in that process. What you're going to end up with is people who come in and say, just get me in the door and I can close anyone. Well, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I'd be a millionaire. Because it sounds good, but it actually doesn't. It isn't the way things work. I mean, most salespeople, it's not even the 80-20 rule. I was going over this with somebody recently. It's more like the 5-95 rule that, 80% of your sales are 20% of the people, but 80% of their sales are 20% of those people. So it's just insanely skewed. So I would, before I hired a commissioned salesperson, I would develop an effective pitch. And by that, I mean question track. Now, I want to go back to something else. And that is, you want to stay in your wheelhouse to the degree that you can compartmentalize. You have a way to close people on your core social media marketing, branding offering. Do not go out of that lane until you've got them closed and you're past your first month installation, getting started piece. You can develop a collateral piece that talks about other services you can provide. And you can mention there are some other things that you can do, but it is not appropriate to talk about them right now. Okay. So compartmentalize, focus on your strength, focus on the reason why they're talking to you, get that done. Once you prove your ability in that regard, then it is entirely appropriate to discuss the upsell. So if they're happy, the sooner you bring in the discussion of the upsell, the better. The easiest way to do that is with a collateral piece that talks about it, sales aid, whatever it is, web page that talks about other things that you might be able to do for that company, whether it's website development or what have you, right? Put it in front of them. Now, the nobody wants to have that discussion early on. It will dilute your conversation, and it'll cause you to lose more customers than you'll get. But if you bring it up, just say, yeah, there's a bunch of other things we do. I don't want to worry about them now. We'll talk about them once I prove my merit the first month. Right? Then you do that, right? And now you can practice your selling skills in that upsell, right? Because if your goal is to scale the business, again, we didn't talk too much about the list issue and all that. That may be a subject for another day. But if you get a sales process that's question based, that gets people to want to pay more rather than less, gets them to close sooner rather than later, gets them to unhooks them from the desire to do it in house or to have somebody who's local, right? If you can create that credibility, a question track based sales call will do that. You'll increase your close rate, you'll increase your margins. Forget about whether or not you can afford more, as a commissioned salesperson. They will be more likely to be successful. Now, if you recognize that what makes a commissioned salesperson successful is his ability to ask good questions, uncover needs, build value, and create urgency. So now you know better what to look for, and that person is more likely to be successful. So that gets you the win-win. You may not want to learn a new skill, but given where you are in the business, you can actually afford to, because you got enough business that'll work. Right? You can get to first base without taking your foot off. You can get to second base without taking your foot off at first base.
Yeah,
that's kind of, you're in a fortunate situation to be able to do that. And that's how I would do it. Just there's too many sales guys that if you don't tell them what to do, it's just going to take your money, and 6 months later you're going to say this didn't work, especially in that business. So, and you could get away with an inside salesperson rather than a rainmaker. That's the other thing. So you can pay a lot less for a commissioned salesperson because they're going to be working the phones anyway, right?
Yeah.
You're doing the lead generation, so you don't have to pay them to generate leads. So you're, again, ahead of the game there. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a ton. I think a lot of as on the sales side, that is exactly what I thought. I very much think that it's more of a thing on me to build that side. But yeah, especially on kind of the insight on the direction I'm taking. The books, very interested to check those out. But I really think that's a lot of this has been super helpful in kind of wrapping my brain around where I am and next steps in pursuing that goal that I have in mind.
Cool. I appreciate it.